Welcome to the first episode of our series, The Civilization That Walked Away. I'm your host, Elias, and I'm joined by Clara. We are so glad you're here to join us on what is, quite frankly, one of the most haunting journeys into the human past ever recorded.
Over the next 8 episodes, we're going to peel back the layers of a ghost story that spans 5 millennia. We aren't just talking about a lost tribe or a single city. We're talking about a superpower that dominated the ancient world, a society that was bigger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, and then, seemingly by choice, let it all turn to dust.
Throughout this series, we'll be investigating the impossible contradictions of the Indus Valley civilization. We'll look at their cities without kings and their armies without wars. We'll struggle with a language that no modern human can read, and we'll follow the trail of 1 million people who watched their rivers dry up and decided that instead of fighting for the ruins, they would simply walk away.
It's a story that challenges everything we think we know about progress. But before we can understand why they left, we have to understand what they built. We have to look at the most advanced civilization you've probably never heard of.
Let's go back to 1922. An officer of the Archaeological Survey of India named R.D. Banerjee was excavating a Buddhist stupa in a place called Sindh. He was looking for relics from the 2nd century A.D. But as he dug deeper, past the layers of the known world, he hit something impossible.
He found bricks, not the crude, sun-dried mud bricks of a local village, but high-fired, kiln-baked bricks of a quality that rivaled the British Empire's own construction.
He kept digging. He found jewelry. He found finely carved seals made of white steatite. He realized he wasn't looking at a small outpost. He was standing on the roof of a buried metropolis.
This was Mohenjo-Daro, the mound of the dead. But what's haunting isn't the death, it's the life. It was a city that solved problems we still struggle with today: urban density, hygiene, and social equality.
When we talk about the Bronze Age, we have a bit of a big 3 problem. It's always Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China. But the Indus Valley civilization was the largest of them all. We're talking over 1 million square kilometers, twice the size of the Egyptian Old Kingdom.
To give our listeners a sense of the geography, imagine a triangle. The top point is in the rugged foothills of the Himalayas, the western point reaches into the deserts of Iranian borderlands, and the eastern point stretches toward what is now New Delhi.
And it wasn't just a wasteland. Back then, this was the Green Indus. We find seals depicting rhinoceroses, elephants, and tigers. This was a lush tropical paradise that these people transformed into an urban network.
And it was an incredibly connected world. We have records from Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, where the great king Sargon of Akkad boasts about ships from a place called Meluha docking at his capital.
Meluha, that's what the Mesopotamians called the Indus Valley.
Exactly. And they weren't just trading trinkets. They were trading massive quantities of gold, copper, and ivory. They were the factory of the ancient world. They were so advanced that they actually exported high-fashion items.
Like the carnelian beads. I've seen photos of these. They're these long, deep red stones, sometimes 3 or 4 inches long, with tiny holes drilled through the center. How did they do that without power tools?
It's a miracle of ancient technology. They used micro-drills made of a special stone called phytan. It would take a modern craftsman hours to do what they were doing in bulk. We find these beads in the royal tombs of in Iraq. The queens of Mesopotamia were literally wearing made-in-India jewelry.
So they were rich, but they didn't spend their money on golden masks for dead kings. They spent it on the city itself. Let's talk about the grid again, because if you walk through a Harappan city, you aren't just seeing houses, you're seeing a social philosophy.
If you look at a map of Mohenjo-Daro, the city is split into 2 parts. There's the lower town, where the people lived, and the citadel, built on a massive artificial platform of mud bricks, 12 meters high.
Now, in any other culture, that citadel would be the king's palace.
Right, but here, the citadel holds a massive granary. It holds the Great Bath. It holds what looks like a town hall. It's as if the high ground was reserved for the things that kept everyone alive, water and food, rather than the person who ruled them.
Let's talk about the water engineering, because this is where the 15 minutes of fame for any Harappan engineer would come from. They didn't just have drains, they had tide control.
You're thinking of Lothal.
Exactly. Lothal was their port city on the coast of the Arabian Sea. They built the world's first known dry dock. It's a massive brick basin that used the tides of the ocean to float ships in and out. They understood the lunar cycle and the physics of water displacement 4,000 years before the Industrial Revolution.
And even inside the homes, the attention to detail is staggering. We find these terracotta pipes that were used to move water from the second floor of a house down to the street level. They had a trash chute system where people could drop their waste into a bin that opened onto the street for collection.
It sounds oddly modern. It sounds like a place you could actually live.
It does, and that's what makes the daily life artifacts so touching. We find terracotta toys. We find little clay bowls with heads that wiggle on a string. We find tiny bird-shaped whistles.
Just like that. You can imagine a child 5,000 years ago playing in a street that was cleaner than most medieval European cities. We find dice that are almost identical to the ones we use today. We find vanity cases with kohl for the eyes, and even little bronze mirrors.
These were people who cared about their appearance, their children, and their comfort. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. But there is a shadow in the room.
The silence.
Yes, because for all this complexity, the maritime docks, the carnelian drills, the city grids, we have found no records of a single name, not one general, not one architect, not one poet.
We have the dancing girl bronze. She's only 4 inches tall, but she's revolutionary. She's standing with her hand on her hip, covered in bangles, looking incredibly confident. She doesn't look like a goddess. She looks like a real person.
And then there's the priest king statue. In Egypt, a ruler would be 50 feet tall and made of gold. Here, the most iconic figure we found is only 7 inches tall. He's wearing a headband and a robe with a trefoil pattern. He's small enough to fit in your palm. It's the miniature civilization. Everything is human-scaled.
We have to talk about the Harappan standard again, because this is the real mystery of their power. To have every brick in a 1,000,000 square kilometer area follow the ratio of 4 to 2 to 1, that requires a massive invisible infrastructure.
It's like the ISO standards of today. If you buy a screw in Japan, it fits a bolt made in Germany. The Harappans had that, across a dozen different modern countries' worth of territory.
They even had a standardized system of weights, these tiny polished Kurt cubes. They're so accurate that even today, when we put them on digital scales, they're within a fraction of a % of each other. So we have a society that is peaceful, incredibly clean, technologically superior, and wealthy. They have international trade, they have high fashion, they have toys for their kids. They are at the top of the world. And then the decay starts. It's not a bomb, it's not a wall falling down. It's a loss of the standard.
Around 1900 BCE, something breaks. In the later layers of Mohenjo-Daro, we see that people stopped following the grid. They started building houses in the middle of the streets. They stopped cleaning the drains.
It's the enclosure of the commons. The civic pride that built the Great Bath just evaporates, and then the people leave. They don't leave piles of bodies. They leave their jewelry under the floors. They leave their pots on the tables. And they walk away.
We have spent a century looking for the great disaster, the earthquake, the flood, the massacre. We've looked for the skeletons in the street that early archaeologists claimed were evidence of a war.
But when we looked closer at those skeletons, we realized they weren't victims of a battle. They were burials, simple, quiet burials.
So if it wasn't a war and it wasn't a massacre, what was it? What could make 1 million people decide that their toilets, their docks, and their perfectly planned cities were no longer worth living in?
Because despite all this sophistication, there is no sign they were conquered. Next time, we look at the social order. If there were no kings, who was in charge? And why did they never build an army to defend the paradise they had created? We're diving into Episode 2, Cities Without Kings, Armies Without Wars.